as well as potential atrocity crimes. Numerous monitoring, investigating, and reporting mechanisms provide for similar contributions. The same applies to special rapporteurs and their reporting. And I'm glad that Victor will say something more about their contributions. Introducing special sessions, intersessional meetings, and informal dialogues with High Commissioner is very helpful as well. When OHCHR field presences or human rights components of peacekeeping and operations and special political missions warn that the situation in some country situations is rapidly deteriorating, it is important that the Human Rights Council can be quickly informed and for Human Rights Council to take appropriate action, working in close coordination with other UN organs, especially the Security Council. It is excellent that Yvette can continue discussing this issue. But Human Rights Council's influence in the field is not only restricted to operational prevention addressing imminent human rights threats. Structural prevention contributing to make countries more resilient to potential human rights violations is an area where in future I think we should invest even more. It is a part of the comprehensive prevention agenda that the Secretary General consistently advocates. In this regard, I'm happy that next panelists will also address related issues. Subhatra will discuss the importance of technical cooperation, building human rights capacities, make countries more resilient to all human rights challenges. Human rights protection structures should be treated broadly. In addition to national human rights institutions, they include free media, independent civil society, as well as organized education and human rights training. One of the greatest achievements of the Human Rights Council is the Universal Periodic Review. If civil society, national human rights institutions, as well as special rapporteurs provide the right input, that can provide for an excellent human rights situation diagnostic in individual countries. UPR's role is not naming and shaming, but rather identifying human rights protection and promotion gaps and helping countries to improve the situation. I'm therefore very glad that Mona will be able to expand on that as well. Finally, Mr. Moderator, let me conclude. The Human Rights Council has an important influence in the field directly and indirectly. Its standard-setting role should be always accompanied with implementation efforts. OHCHR does a wonderful job in this respect. Dear former colleagues, I continue to be proud of your work. However, human rights in the field are one UN task. Only if every head of the UN mission, every UN coordinator, as well as every UN staff member perceives human rights as the core UN value, as well as recognizes her and his duty to implement them in the field, we can successfully move forward. In this moving forward, the Human Rights Council and High Commissioner for Human Rights with her independent mandate are in the center. However, overall implementation of human rights in the field is the whole of UN's job, working together with governments and civil society. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Simonovic, pour vos
Mr.
propos.
Simonovic,
C'était un grand plaisir de
for
travailler avec vous pendant toutes ces années.
words, and it was a great pleasure to work with you.
I understand that the link has been established now with Mr. Jan Eliasson, who was president of the 60th session of the GA when the Council resolution was adopted, and was, of course, former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. As was mentioned by previous speakers, the Council working methods have profoundly evolved during the past 50 sessions. The magnitude of these changes has been underlined, and to an extent it might be very fair to state that the Council architecture today is significantly different to the one that existed at the very start of its existence. Mr. Eliasson, having presided over the very delicate negotiation that led to the adoption of Resolution 60/251, and having later worked with the Council as Deputy Secretary General, would you mind sharing your thoughts about this particular evolution? And in particular, my question would be about your insights on whether your assumptions and expectations at the start of the process have materialized, and that would be very much appreciated if you could shed light and provide us with some examples. Mr. Eliasson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, moderator. First of all, do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Very well. Thank you.
Good, good. I'm very glad to be invited. I was, as you know, President General Assembly 2005 and 6. The negotiations went on for almost half a year and ended up with the decision of the General Assembly on the 15th of March to adopt Resolution 60/251 with 170 votes, 3 abstentions, and 4 vote against. First, I would say that they were difficult and arduous, and that we had sometimes even a dramatic and confrontational situation. First of all, the preceding Human Rights Commission had lost respect and legitimacy, which created a certain urgency to come to conclusions. Secondly, we had very high ambition for the new council, because it was based on the formula from September 2005 in the outcome document, where we stated that there is no peace without development, and no development without peace, and neither peace nor development without respect of human rights. So these 3 pillars are interdependent. They are either mutually reinforcing or they are mutually undermining and weakening. The third aspect of the talks were that they were infected by the present political atmosphere in a very serious area. Namely, you may recall the Danish cartoons of 2006, which caused actually deadly demonstrations in several parts of the Muslim world, and quite a bit of diplomatic turmoil in New York, and I guess also in Geneva. That led to a move in the last minute by certain Muslim countries, particularly Pakistan, to have an additional paragraph in the resolution text. And lastly, there were very maximalistic demands from not least the United States under Ambassador John Bolton, which meant, for instance, that they questioned the universality by only adopting members who were believers and could prove their records and in human rights. Anyway, it led to a vote, and it was established, and it was quite controversial from the point of view that a resolution of this nature usually is adopted by consensus. But I felt as president that I had to move along, because otherwise the United Nations would have lacked a legitimate branch of human rights, which is absolutely crucial. In view of that, those 3 pillars that I mentioned in the beginning. On the achievement, Mr. Moderator, I would say that you have done a great job. I think the 50 sessions that you have had have been very productive. I think, like Ivan, whom I listened to a while ago, is right in pointing to the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, as a main pillar of the Human Rights Council architecture. By establishing the universality as a principle, I think we got a more relaxed atmosphere for the negotiations. That, plus the fact that I very often, as president and my also co-chairs, stress that human rights is not only political and civil, it's also economic, social, and cultural. That led to a certain reduction of that tension, those tensions that I mentioned in the beginning. The second thing that I like about the Council's development is that you have used the mechanisms in a very sharp way, an adequate way, fact-finding missions, commissions of inquiries, independent experts, and also developed the very important aspect of technical assistance and capacity building. And also the fact that you have been flexible on regular sessions and special sessions. And of course that the Office of the High Commissioner has been very active through the years. I think you have had excellent commissioners during the years since I left the work as President of the General Assembly. And here I, of course, want to pay a special tribute to my friend Michel Bachelet, who is evidently leaving now, a person who has personal experiences of violations of human rights, and a person who has played a champion role in standing up for human rights in the world. So thank you for all your work. Now, another thing that has been very good, as I understand, is that you have extended your contact with civil society, because I think this is extremely important that the Council stands for openness and accountability. It has to be respected and well regarded in all parts of the world. And I think the fact that you connect with the people in the spirit of the UN Charter, we the peoples, remember, and by that you reach out. And I think you should continue on that road, if I may give a piece of modest advice. For the challenges and problems that exist, and possibly even room for improvement, I think still we have the problem that I pointed to as President of General Assembly at the time, namely the underfunding of the third pillar of the human rights pillar. We need to also to put resources behind this priority of human rights. I also think that we could do more on education and knowledge of human rights and international humanitarian law. I think it is striking, if you look at the media in the world and debates and political councils, that there isn't the depth and detailed knowledge that is necessary. So I think anything you can invest in further education on different levels on human rights and international humanitarian law could be extremely important, also to reach out to young people and the next generation who have to run with the baton in this race. I also think that you could do more with the human rights as a preventive tool. When I was Deputy Secretary General, I tried together with Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, to launch a program called Human Rights Up Front, which, among other things, had an element of early warning in its structure, that in fact human rights violations are often the first sign of a conflict, even a military conflict to come. And if we listen to those conflicts early on, if we listen to the vibrations in the ground, we can avoid disasters, both in human terms and in financial terms. So here is, I think, a room for further development and bringing up this program, which has been continued also with the initiative of the President of Secretary Guterres. But I think we should particularly point to the preventive value of identifying human rights violations as the start of a conflict to come. So, of course, I could add to the list that we have to look around the world right now and see a rather somber picture. We need protection of the human rights defenders. We need to watch out for the free press and journalist situations. We have to look at the freedom of association and assembly, which is threatened in very